Let's travel back in time for a moment here.
Okay, time travel, I'm in.
Yeah, we are heading back about 100 years or so, dropping right into a specific fable from today's source material.
Right.
And the text centers on a woman, but, we really need to establish right from the start that this is not just any woman.
No, definitely not.
We are talking about a universally desired, just breathtakingly beautiful person, like the kind of absolute beauty that alters the literal gravity of whatever room she walks into.
Yeah, the kind of physical and, I guess, charismatic presence that immediately forces everyone else into this state of intense awareness.
Exactly.
Like before a single word is even spoken, she just commands the entire environment.
Right. And naturally, because, well, human beings are incredibly predictable, this immense beauty creates a massive bottleneck of suitors.
Of course.
They are lining up around the block. And we are not talking about average, everyday citizens here. These are the absolute elite of her era.
The heavy hitters.
Yeah. Wealthy merchants who have traveled continents, charming aristocrats with massive estates, the absolute most charismatic, silver-tongued men of her time.
Right.
And they are all just throwing themselves into this highly competitive arena of courtship, right? Trying every conceivable method to win her over.
Like a competition.
Total competition. They are bringing her exotic gifts. They are reciting these epic poems that they literally commissioned. They are performing these grand, elaborate monologues entirely focused on her beauty.
It's actually a fascinating dynamic to visualize if you think about it.
How so?
Well, all of these powerful, successful men are essentially putting on a one-man theatrical production for her.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
They're completely convinced that the way to win a high-value partner is through an overwhelming display of their own value.
Right, like, look how great I am.
Exactly. They are pulling out their very best material, assuming that, more effort, more volume, and more charm will eventually just break down her defenses.
But here's the thing. She is utterly unimpressed.
Wow. All of it.
She rejects them all. It's a complete across-the-board shutdown. The poetry doesn't work. The exotic gifts don't work.
Harsh.
The charm just falls completely flat. But then, one day, the entire dynamic shifts.
Okay.
She goes to her father, and she is completely animated. Her eyes are wide. She is speaking quickly, and she says, "Father, I have just met the most interesting, the most charming, the most captivating man I have ever encountered in my entire life."
Oh, wow. So someone finally cracked the code.
Right. And her father, hearing this sudden spike in excitement, he mentally prepares himself.
Yeah, he figures the competition is finally over.
Exactly. He thinks the most entertaining man in the entire kingdom has finally arrived and just swept her off her feet.
Which, that is a completely logical assumption for the father to make.
Totally.
If someone sweeps you off your feet with their charm and keeps you constantly entertained, well, we've been conditioned by every romantic story ever told to believe that is the person who wins the day.
Right. The prize goes to the best performer.
Exactly. The loudest, most impressive broadcaster.
But here is the twist that essentially sets up our entire conversation today.
Let's hear it.
A short time later, she goes back to her father's room. But this time, her energy is completely different.
Different how?
The frantic, elevated excitement is just gone. Instead, she is incredibly calm. She speaks with this quiet, profound serenity.
Okay.
She sits down and says to him, "Father, yesterday, I met the man who listened to me better than anyone else my entire life. He is the man who understands me the most."
So we have two completely different experiences presented to the father here.
Exactly. Two completely different men.
One generated a massive spike of intense entertainment and excitement. The other generated a profound sense of calm and, being truly understood.
And the ultimate question of the fable, who does she actually marry?
I think I know where this is going.
Well, you, the listener, seeing the theme of today's deep dive, you might have already guessed it too. She chose the second man.
The listener.
She chose the listener. And the source material we are exploring today explains the psychology of exactly why this happened.
Right. She tells her father that all those other men, the entertaining ones, the charming aristocrats with their poetry, they only ever praised her surface-level beauty.
Because they didn't really know her.
Exactly. They were constantly performing for her, trying to win her like she was just some shiny trophy.
They were focused entirely on their own output. They were using her as an audience for their own greatness, rather than actually engaging with her as a complex human being.
But the man she chose gave her something completely different. He gave her ultimate peace of mind.
which is huge.
And the text actually reveals the exact words he used, the words that won over the most sought-after woman in the world.
What do you say?
He simply looked at her amidst all this chaos of courtship and said, "It must have been hard not being able to talk until now. I'm not good at talking, but I love listening."
Man, that is a remarkably powerful statement.
It really is.
He completely flips the script on what society assumes is required to win someone over.
Yeah, he didn't try to outperform the aristocrats at all. No. He identified the massive psychological deficit she was experiencing, which was the sheer exhaustion of constantly being spoken at.
Yeah.
And he offered her the exact remedy.
Right. And that dynamic right there is the perfect launch pad for what we are doing today.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Today's deep dive is exploring a fascinating text that makes a very bold countercultural argument.
I love those.
It claims that the single most powerful, the highest return on investment, and honestly, the most bizarrely underutilized skill in human communication isn't speaking.
Right.
It's not being charming. It's not having the sharpest wit or being the smartest person in the boardroom. It is the raw, mechanical art of listening.
And we have some incredible source material to guide us through this premise today.
We really do.
We are going to be looking at notes, observations, and excerpts from a Japanese author who has a truly unique background.
Yeah, tell them about this guy because it's wild.
Right, so this is not an ivory tower academic who studied communication in some sterile university lab.
Not at all.
This is someone who started out running a local takoyaki stand, like a small street food stall, then expanded into running a dining establishment, specifically an izakaya.
And for those who might not know, an izakaya is essentially a Japanese pub or tavern, right?
Exactly. It's a very specific kind of vibrant, loud dining experience. And from those incredibly grassroots, frankly chaotic beginnings, he eventually went on to give over 3,000 speeches.
That number is just insane to me.
3,000. And he became a highly sought-after consultant for major corporations based on what he learned.
3,000 speeches is a staggering amount of stage time. That is thousands of hours of looking directly into the eyes of audiences, trying to hold their attention, reading their body language in real time.
It is an absolute masterclass in human observation.
Totally.
And we are going to explore his core philosophy today, which was forged in those noisy taverns and refined on those massive stages.
Right.
We will look at how a specific type of listening can literally dismantle and transform a toxic corporate culture.
Which is something I think everyone listening can relate to.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, we're going to break down the highly specific, almost theatrical physical mechanics of being what he calls a beautiful listener.
The physical stuff is my favorite part.
It's so weird, but so practical. And finally, we will get into the psychology of boundaries, exploring why knowing exactly where your empathy stops is actually the secret to being a phenomenal friend and colleague.
Right, rather than just burning yourself out completely.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to transition from that beautiful 100-year-old fable to the real-world author of our source text, because his personal realization about his own success genuinely caught me off guard.
Very surprising.
Like, you hear 3,000 lectures, and you immediately picture someone who spent their entire adolescence standing in front of a mirror, practicing vocal warm-ups, studying the great orators of history, right?
Yeah, meticulously crafting every single sentence for maximum impact. You expect a very deliberate, calculated path to becoming a master speaker.
Yes. You assume they read all the classic books on rhetoric and persuasion.
Right.
But the author claims the exact opposite. He says he never, ever actually practiced public speaking.
Which sounds impossible, but he insists on it.
It wasn't something he studied in any formal sense at all. His communication skills, his ability to eventually captivate audiences of hundreds or thousands of people, organically developed from the most mundane, everyday interactions imaginable.
At the izakaya.
Exactly. It all stemmed from interacting with his staff at his dining business.
And the environment of an izakaya is crucial context for us to establish here for the listener.
Yeah, set the scene a bit.
It is not a quiet, sterile boardroom where people take turns speaking politely. It is loud. It is chaotic.
There's probably smoke, music.
Yes, there are clinking glasses. People are shouting orders across the room. Customers are venting about their terrible workdays at the top of their lungs.
Right.
It is a high-stress, fast-paced environment where communication has to be incredibly efficient, but also deeply relational. Hospitality is the absolute core of the business.
So if the staff doesn't feel connected and supported, the entire operation just collapses.
Exactly. And he says his communication training, if you can even call it that, consisted simply of sending messages to his staff while they smiled and nodded back at him.
Wow.
That daily repetition, that constant underlying feedback loop of feeling heard and supported by his team in a chaotic environment naturally accustomed him to speaking in front of people.
It essentially removed the friction of communication.
Yes.
But the author goes a step further and he makes a very definitive statement that I found fascinating. He flat out states that trying to captivate people purely through your own talking, purely through your own output, is incredibly difficult.
Even for him.
Right, even for him, a paid professional who makes a living holding a microphone.
He admits to constantly agonizing over it. He stands backstage thinking, what are people actually interested in today?
Yeah.
What kind of stories will make them feel this is relevant to their own specific lives?
The pressure has to be immense.
Oh, yeah. How do I phrase this concept so it truly resonates and doesn't just bounce off them? He says that even though he gets paid handsomely to face people and speak, he still feels inexperienced.
Which is wild humility from a guy who's done it 3,000 times.
He struggles with these questions constantly because the variable of the audience is always changing. You never know exactly who is in the room.
And his ultimate conclusion from all of this struggle, from the 3,000 speeches and the late nights at the izakaya, is that cultivating what he calls listening power is 10 times easier
10 times.
and yields a 10 times better cost performance, or ROI, than trying to master speaking power.
10 times easier. That is a massive, highly specific claim.
It is. And here's where it gets really interesting for me, because I actually want to pause and challenge this premise a little bit.
Oh, for it.
Is listening actually easier?
Oh.
Because when I think about being a truly active, deeply engaged listener, it feels like it takes way more mental calories than just rambling on about a topic I already know intimately.
I could see that.
I always think of it like the difference between broadcasting a radio signal and trying to precisely tune a receiver.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Broadcasting is just pushing power out into the void, right? It takes energy, sure, but it's indiscriminate. You just talk.
You're just projecting.
Exactly. Tuning a receiver, however, requires minute adjustments, intense focus, filtering out the static, locking onto a specific frequency, and then staying there without drifting. Doesn't true listening require far more sustained effort?
That analogy of the broadcaster versus a receiver actually gets right to the heart of the mechanism here.
Rare.
What's fascinating here is that the author isn't actually arguing that listening requires zero effort,
Okay.
or that you just sit there like a piece of furniture letting words wash over you.
Right, right.
He is talking about the return on the effort invested. Let's look at the cognitive load of speaking, the broadcasting, as you put it.
Yeah.
It is heavily weighted toward guessing. Yes. When you stand up to speak, whether to an auditorium of 500 people or to one person on a date, you are essentially guessing. You are guessing what they care about.
No, I see.
You are guessing their emotional state. You are guessing their background knowledge.
You were basically shooting in the dark, burning a massive amount of cognitive fuel, hoping your words hit a target you can barely even see.
Exactly. And if your guess is wrong, the entire interaction fails. They tune out.
Right.
But when you switch to being the receiver, when you focus your energy entirely on the mechanics of listening, the other person does all the heavy lifting of revealing what actually matters to them.
Wow. They hand you the exact blueprint to their inner world.
Yes. Think back to the fable we opened with. The beautiful woman didn't need the suitors to guess what specific rhythm of poetry would make her swoon.
Right. She didn't care about the poetry.
She was fundamentally desperate to simply be understood as a complex human being rather than a beautiful object to be acquired.
And the man who won her over didn't have to guess her favorite color or her favorite flower. He just had to provide the psychological space for her to reveal herself.
Exactly. So the easier part isn't about physical or mental laziness. It's about eliminating the massive energy drain of inventing a connection out of thin air.
You just let the other person build the bridge, and you provide the solid foundation for them to build it on.
The cost of acquiring the right answer is essentially zero, because they give it to you voluntarily.
That completely flips how I think about social anxiety, honestly.
And we can apply this directly to the listener's daily life right now. Think about your own experiences. You listening over the last month. How often have you laid awake at night, staring at the ceiling, stressing over exactly what you're going to say in a crucial meeting the next day?
Oh, all the time.
Or agonizing over the perfect opening line for a networking event? You are spending massive amounts of psychological energy trying to construct the perfect broadcast.
So true.
Now ask yourself, how often do you spend that same amount of time, or any time at all, preparing how you are going to listen?
I am so guilty of this constantly. I prep my talking points, I make my slides, I rehearse my jokes in the shower.
We all do it.
I have never, not once, sat down and prepped my listening posture for a meeting.
Because we culturally overinvest in the speaking side of the equation. And as we just established, that side has a very high failure rate because it relies entirely on accurate guessing.
Right.
The author's thesis is that if you take even a fraction of that anxious energy and redirect it into the mechanics of listening, the cost performance, the return on that energetic investment, is 10 times greater.
Why is it so much greater, though?
Because the modern world is filled with people who are practically starving for an audience.
Oh, man. The ROI of listening is astronomical because the demand for being heard is at an all-time high,
Mhm.
and the supply of competent listeners is incredibly low.
Exactly. It's basic supply and demand.
If we accept that premise, it creates a massive tension for me.
Also,
Well, if listening is this undeniable superpower, right? If it yields a 10 times return on investment, why is it so incredibly rare?
yes.
Like, why aren't we all walking around being these master listeners, unlocking all these benefits in our careers and relationships?
That paradox is exactly what the author confronted as he moved from the izakaya into the corporate consulting world.
Right. If the solution is so mathematically sound, why is the problem so culturally prevalent?
Let's get into it.
To answer that, the author guides us into a critique of modern organizational culture that, honestly, I suspect will sound painfully familiar to anyone listening who has ever worked in an office, or frankly, any group setting.
Yeah, prepare to feel a little seen here.
As this author transitioned into consulting for various companies, he noticed a glaring, systemic absence of two vital elements: empathy and affirmation.
He walked into these boardrooms and executive suites and realized that the foundational culture of these organizations was completely devoid of the very psychological elements that make human beings feel safe enough to actually contribute.
Right. And the defining image he uses to capture this toxic environment is just brilliant.
It's so accurate.
He describes leaders and bosses sitting in meetings with their arms tightly crossed, wearing what he calls serious true faces, and constantly radiating judgment.
A true face. This is a vital concept to understand.
Break that down.
It is essentially a resting face, completely stripped of warmth, encouragement, or vulnerability. It is a mask of objective evaluation.
Like a judge at a tribunal.
Exactly. Leaders often adopt it because they think it makes them look authoritative, impartial, and serious. They believe they are projecting competence.
But what is the actual result of sitting across a conference table from a boss with crossed arms and a judging true face?
Total panic.
Yes.
Yeah.
The employees sitting on the other side suffer from a psychological condition the author has coined ping pong disease.
I love this visualization so much.
It's perfect. The employees are terrified. They are nervously bouncing around in their seats, their eyes darting back and forth, just desperately trying to find the single correct answer that will appease the boss and end the uncomfortable tension in the room.
They aren't thinking creatively at all.
No, they're just playing desperate defense.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can look at the underlying mechanism of ping pong disease from a neurological standpoint.
Oh, let's go there.
When the human brain detects the true face and the crossed arms, it doesn't process it as, oh, my boss is being objective and professional.
Right. The brain doesn't care about corporate hierarchy.
Exactly. The amygdala, which is the primal fear center of the brain, processes that posture as an active threat.
An actual physical threat.
Yes. It is like having a background application on your computer suddenly consume 80% of your RAM just to run a threat detection program. Your brain's executive functioning, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for innovation, complex problem solving, and genuine collaboration, literally doesn't have the processing power left to function optimally.
It just shuts down.
It completely shuts down. You revert to a survival mechanism. You are just trying to hit the ping pong ball back over the net without making a fatal mistake that gets you fired.
And the author points out the tragic irony of all this, right? He says these exact same leaders, the ones sitting there with crossed arms triggering the amygdala hijack in their staff, they constantly approach him asking for a magic bullet.
All the time.
They pull him aside in the hallway and ask, How do I raise my staff's motivation? They seem so uninspired.
Why aren't they giving me any good ideas?
Exactly. And they want to implement expensive new training programs. They want to change the bonus structures, alter the KPIs, bring in, I don't know, ping pong tables for the break room.
The classic startup Band-Aid.
Right. They want to change everything about the staff. But the author insists none of this will ever work. The only thing that actually moves the needle, the only thing that cures ping pong disease, is the leader fundamentally changing their own listening posture.
This requires a profound shift in accountability.
Yeah, you have to look in the mirror.
Leaders have to realize that organizations, whether we are talking about a massive multinational corporation, a 10-person startup, a local volunteer committee, or honestly, even a family sitting around a dinner table, these are all entities that run on human beings.
Right.
And human beings, despite our best attempts to pretend otherwise in professional settings, run on emotion.
We spend billions of dollars globally trying to train people to leave their emotions at the door when they walk into work. But it's biologically impossible.
It completely defies our neurology.
Mm.
The foundational emotion required for human potential to actually bloom. For an employee to feel safe enough to give you their most fragile, innovative ideas isn't tension.
Right.
It isn't the fear of failure or the pressure of a deadline. It is a Japanese concept, the author highlights, called anshinkan.
Anshinkai.
Yes. It translates roughly to peace of mind, or a deep foundational sense of security.
Peace of mind. So what does this all mean for the listener?
Think about your own role.
Yeah, because you listening right now, you might not be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, but you might be a shift manager at a retail store.
Or a parent dealing with a teenager.
Totally. You might be the captain of a local recreational sports team, or someone who organizes a community garden.
Anyone in a position of influence.
The realization here is that your silent physical posture is literally shouting at your team.
It is the loudest voice in the room.
Yes, it is dictating the psychological safety of everyone around you. If you're tense, they're tense.
Your posture creates the weather system of the entire room.
Let's paint a vivid mental picture of this for everyone. Imagine you have a slightly risky, out-of-the-box idea for a project at work.
Okay, a fragile idea.
Right, it's not fully formed yet.
Uh.
First, imagine pitching that fragile idea to the arms-crossed, true-face judging boss. You walk into their office, they lean back in their expensive leather chair, tightly cross their arms, stare at you blankly, and just say, "Go ahead, pitch me."
Just hearing you say that makes my chest tight.
Exactly. Instantly, your throat closes up. You start second-guessing your own idea before you have even finished the first sentence.
You start watering down the risky parts to make it safer.
Totally. You monitor their micro-expressions for any sign of approval, and finding none, you just rush to finish so you can leave.
It's pure survival.
Now imagine pitching that exact same idea to a different archetype. Let's say a relaxed, nodding parent figure.
Okay, different weather system.
Completely different. Someone who leans forward slightly, leaves their hands uncrossed and open on the desk, smiles warmly, and nods continuously as you speak, giving you these tiny physical cues and encouragement.
The physical sensation in your own body changes completely in that scenario.
It is night and day.
In the second scenario, your breathing regulates. Your heart rate actually drops. You speak with more conviction because the environment has granted you the grace to be imperfect.
Right. If you stumble over a word, you don't panic and apologize profusely. You just correct yourself and keep going.
Because the background threat detection app in your brain is closed, and you have full access to your cognitive abilities.
And the crazy thing is, the boss in the first scenario thinks they're just being objective. They don't realize their posture is an active weapon that is killing the very innovation they are begging their staff for.
The author makes it very clear. The leader's posture must change first. You cannot demand anshinkan from your staff. You have to emit it.
You have to generate it.
You have to manufacture that peace of mind through your own physical presence before you can expect anything of value in return.
Okay, now, if you are listening to this, you might naturally be a little skeptical.
Sure.
Because it is incredibly easy to sit here on a microphone and say, hey, just project peace of mind, emit anshinkan.
It sounds like a bumper sticker.
Right. It belongs on a motivational poster in a break room with a picture of a mountain. But how do we actually do that physically?
That is the million-dollar question.
How do we stop being the arms-crossed boss when that posture feels so natural and protective to us? Well, the source material provides surprisingly specific, almost theatrical, physical instructions on how to become what the author calls a reaction beauty.
I love that phrase, reaction beauty. And we're moving from the philosophy of listening into the raw physical mechanics of it here.
And the text gets incredibly detailed.
It does.
And it starts with a part of our body we almost never think about consciously when we are listening, our hands.
Right. The hands are a huge giveaway.
The author stresses that people unconsciously watch your hands during a conversation. Your hands are a massive evolutionary indicator of your internal state. And he lists some terrible habits that completely destroy that feeling of safety we just analyzed.
These are the unconscious nervous tics that signal to the speaker that you would rather be literally anywhere else.
Right, like playing with your hair. Or, and this is so highly specific, but I see it all the time, sitting at a restaurant and endlessly tying little knots in the wet towel wrapper while someone is trying to tell you a story.
Oh my gosh, the origami of boredom.
Exactly. Tearing it into tiny little strips.
It signals a complete lack of presence.
Or, worst of all, in a formal business setting, fidgeting with someone's business card right after they hand it to you.
Oh, that's a big faux pas, especially in Japan.
Bending the corners, tapping it rhythmically on the table. The author says you must ruthlessly eliminate these habits.
Yes, they are deal breakers for Anshinkan.
And he issues another massive warning. Absolutely no pointing. He notes that pointing at someone causes deep subconscious discomfort in the person being pointed at, regardless of the context.
The psychology of the pointing gesture is fascinating to unpack.
Tell me about it.
Pointing is inherently aggressive on an evolutionary level.
Really?
Yeah, it singles someone out from the herd. It mimics the gesture of a physical accusation or the targeting of a weapon.
That makes a lot of sense.
Even if you are pointing to say something positive, like you did a great job on that report, the primal brain of the receiver registers the physical action of the finger as a potential threat before the conscious brain can even process the compliment.
Wow. So the body reacts before the brain understands.
Exactly. It immediately spikes tension, raises the heart rate, and completely shatters Anshinkan.
Okay, so we know what not to do with our hands. We keep them still. We don't destroy business cards. We definitely don't point. But what should we do?
This is where it gets fun.
This is where the author introduces his magic techniques. And I have to admit, when I first read the first one, my skepticism completely flared up.
I don't blame you.
The first technique is actually applause.
Yep. Light applause in a one-on-one conversational setting.
Yes, incorporating light applause while laughing during a conversation. He says doing this makes you a reaction beauty. Now, my immediate reaction was, if I sit there clapping while someone is talking, aren't I just being wildly manipulative? Doesn't that feel incredibly fake and theatrical?
It sounds like you're patronizing them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the rationale he provides is deeply rooted in cultural psychology.
It really is.
He points out that applause is inherently auspicious. Think about where we use it. At shrines, during award ceremonies, at the end of a brilliant performance.
Right.
When you offer light applause to someone who just made a good point or told a funny story, you are taking their everyday words and elevating them to an event worthy of celebration.
And that addresses the skepticism of it being manipulative. It is only manipulative if you are doing it to extract a nefarious outcome.
Right, if you're trying to con them.
But if your goal is to genuinely manufacture Anshinkan, applause is the ultimate physical manifestation of affirmation. You are literally cheering for their existence and their contribution to the conversation.
You are celebrating that they chose to speak.
Exactly.
Okay, so the next technique he outlines is called the hotelman.
I like this one.
If you absolutely need to gesture toward the person you are speaking with, instead of pointing your finger, you use an open palm facing upward. The author says you should treat their physical existence with the profound politeness of a high-end hotel concierge guiding a VIP guest.
The open palm is another gesture rooted deeply in our evolutionary psychology.
How so?
It is universally recognized across cultures as a gesture of honesty, submission, and peaceful offering.
Yeah.
It visibly demonstrates that you are hiding nothing in your hands. No weapons, no deception. Contrast that with the pointed finger we discussed earlier. The difference in the physiological emotional response of the receiver is just night and day.
It completely changes the energy in the room.
Totally.
It's the difference between a boss saying, you need to look at this spreadsheet while pointing a finger at your chest versus, I invite you to consider this data with an open palm gesturing toward the screen.
Much better.
And then there is my absolute favorite category in the entire source material, gestures that project intellectual sexiness.
Intellectual sexiness. It is certainly a memorable phrase.
I love that he categorized it this way. How do you physically project intellectual sexiness while listening to someone?
He gives some very specific staging directions for this.
He gives three highly specific options. First, leaning forward slightly, breaking the vertical plane of your chair.
Showing physical interest.
Right. Second, crossing your hands gently in front of you, almost like an amen prayer. Or third, resting a hand thoughtfully near the mouth or between the eyebrows, invoking the imagery of Rodin's famous sculpture, The Thinker.
Right.
But there is a hilarious caveat in the text here. The author explicitly warns the reader, do not put your hand directly between your eyebrows like the actual statue does.
Why not?
Because instead of looking intellectually sexy, you just look deeply troubled.
You immediately cross the line from, I am deeply contemplating your profound words, to, you are giving me a severe migraine and I need an aspirin immediately.
I am actually trying to do the modified Rodin pose right now in the studio as we speak.
I see that.
I've got my hand kind of resting on my chin, my index finger extended at my cheek. I'm hoping I exude intellectual sexiness, but I'm worried I just look like I forgot to shave a patch on my jawline.
It's a fine line to walk, honestly.
But joking aside, I have to ask, why are these specific, almost exaggerated gestures so effective? Why does the author insist on these theatrical movements instead of just telling us to, pay attention?
Because it is about providing visible, undeniable proof of cognitive engagement.
Visible proof.
Right? When you listen to someone, you are performing an entirely invisible internal action.
That's true.
The speaker cannot look inside your skull and see your neurons firing and processing their words. If you sit completely still, staring blankly ahead, you might be listening with every ounce of your being, or you might be silently planning your grocery list for the evening.
And the speaker has absolutely no way to know the difference.
Exactly. By deliberately adopting these specific postures, the open palms, the slight lean, the thoughtful hand placement, you are taking the invisible act of listening and making it physically manifest in the real world.
You're giving them evidence.
Yes. You aren't just letting sound waves passively hit your eardrums. Your body is performing the active, physical act of valuing the speaker's words.
You take the guesswork out of the interaction for the speaker. You are broadcasting a signal through your body language that says, I am here, I am with you, your words actually matter to me.
Exactly.
And if you think these physical mechanics are just theoretical or just some quirky way to try and look good in a Monday morning staff meeting, we need to transition to the most entertaining, real-world anecdote from the entire source material.
Oh, the heist.
The izakaya heist. This is the story of how the author's young izakaya staff used these exact listening techniques to essentially hack the professional mentorship system.
It is a brilliant case study in human psychology.
It really is.
It proves that these mechanics function predictably in the wild outside of a controlled theoretical environment.
So here is the setup. We have the author's izakaya staff. Now, these are not polished, degree-holding corporate executives.
No, not at all.
These are teenagers and 20-somethings. They've got wild, dyed hair colors. They're working late-night shifts in a noisy, messy tavern in a local town called Nagamatsu.
Right.
But occasionally in this town, there would be business seminars or guest speakers coming through, and the author, wanting to develop his staff, would encourage them to attend these things.
To learn from the experts.
But they didn't just walk in blindly and sit in the back. Before going, they would gather at the izakaya during their off hours, place notebooks on the wooden tables, and literally run military-style training drills on their listening posture.
They were actively rehearsing the physical mechanics we just discussed. They were building the muscle memory of the reaction beauty.
That is so wild to me. They were practicing the relentless smiling, the rhythmic nodding, the hotelman hands, the intense visible note-taking.
Getting the reps in.
Yeah. Now, here is where the strategy moves into the execution phase. When they got to the seminar venue, they had a strict rule. Never, ever sit in the front row.
Which goes against everything you're taught in school,
Right.
right? Usually it's sit in the front to show you care.
Exactly. But they had two very specific, highly strategic reasons for avoiding the front row. Reason number one is just hilarious. Once, a staff member was sitting in the front row and, losing focus for a second, started doodling in their notebook instead of taking notes.
Oh.
The speaker saw it from the stage, stopped the lecture, and got visibly furious.
That is a very harsh lesson in the dangers of the front row. The front row is a high-risk zone.
Totally.
You are entirely too visible, and if your attention slips for even a fraction of a second, it registers as a massive insult to the person on stage.
But reason number two is where their architectural genius really lies. They realized, through trial and error, that the first row is actually too close for a speaker standing on an elevated stage.
Right. Physically too close.
A speaker's natural eyeline, their comfortable cone of vision when they look out over a crowd, naturally falls on the third and fourth rows, dead center.
That is a very astute observation of stage physics and human anatomy.
It really is.
When you are standing on a raised platform, looking straight down at the first row requires bending your neck uncomfortably. You naturally project your gaze out into the middle distance to address the room. The third and fourth rows are the focal point of the speaker's world.
So these dyed-haired 20-somethings would strategically claim the third and fourth rows dead center every single time.
Securing the prime real estate.
And from that spot, they deployed their grueling training. Relentless smiling, vigorous nodding at every single point, taking aggressive, meticulous notes on everything the speaker said, leaning forward with, that intellectual sexiness.
They deliberately manufactured a pocket of intense positive energy right in the exact spot the speaker was biologically predisposed to look.
And the payoff was incredible. Put yourself in the shoes of the speaker for a second. These speakers are usually staring out at a sea of crossed arms, true faces, people checking their phones under the table, people looking at the clock. The speakers are often terrified and starved for any sign that they aren't bombing.
The ego of a speaker is very fragile.
It is. And then they look to the third row, and they are just mesmerized by this one pocket of highly engaged youth. The source material notes that almost every single time, the speaker would actually pause their lecture or comment from the stage saying, "Wow, you guys are so earnest," or "You are trying so hard, it's really inspiring."
Because the staff stood out entirely. Because they were providing the one crucial resource every speaker in the world is desperate for.
Yeah.
Validation.
Yes.
They gave the speaker Anshinkan from the audience.
The hook was set right there on the stage. After the speech, the staff would execute the final phase of the plan.
The extraction.
They would go up to the stage, greet the speaker, and politely ask about their plans for the evening. Now, if the speaker was staying overnight in Nagamatsu and had an open evening, the staff would invite them back to their izakaya.
And because the staff had been such an incredible validating audience during the talk, the speakers almost always enthusiastically said yes.
The speakers were basically drawn to the source of their validation.
Like moths to a flame.
So they get these high-level experts back to the izakaya. They feed them, they get them relaxed and happy with a few drinks. And then the staff pulls out those exact same notebooks again.
Oh, that's brilliant.
The speaker is suddenly surrounded by these kids who treat their every word like absolute gospel. The speaker gets incredibly hyped up. They feel like a complete rock star.
And what happens when a speaker feels like a rock star?
They start spilling the good stuff. They start sharing off-the-record secrets, the kind of insider industry knowledge they would never dare share from a public stage with a microphone.
The real mentorship.
Exactly.
Right.
And when the night is over and they finally leave, the speaker is usually so emotionally overwhelmed by this profoundly positive experience that they say, "Call me anytime you are in my city," and they literally hand over their personal phone number.
Which, in the business world, is the absolute holy grail of networking.
I look at this story and I honestly just see a positive psychological heist.
That's a great way to put it.
These kids realized a fundamental truth about human nature. Public speakers, no matter how famous, no matter how successful or wealthy they are often deeply insecure and starving for validation.
Yep.
The izakaya staff traded pure, concentrated attention for invaluable life advice. They essentially secured free, highly exclusive one-on-one mentorship from industry leaders, and all it cost them was the price of a few beers and maybe a train ticket to visit them later.
It is the perfect real-world illustration of the 10x ROI principle we discussed in the first segment.
Right.
Think about the alternative approach here. If those same teenagers had tried to network the traditional way by talking,
Oh, it would have failed miserably.
imagine they walked up to the speaker after the event and tried to sound smart, or pitched a half-baked business idea to prove their worth. The speaker would have politely nodded, handed them a generic corporate business card, and forgotten their faces before they even left the building.
The barrier to entry for impressing an expert with your knowledge is impossibly high.
Yes, but the barrier to entry for impressing an expert with your attention is incredibly low, yet almost no one actually executes it.
Because everyone is too busy trying to be the broadcaster, we are all fighting for the microphone instead of realizing the real power is in the receiver.
The immense rewards these kids reaped came from incredibly simple mechanical habits. Nodding, smiling, taking notes.
It wasn't about possessing brilliant intellect.
No, it was about the discipline of being present. A simple, consistent reaction habit yielded incalculable returns for their future careers.
It is an amazing story that proves the mechanics work. But, as with all incredibly powerful psychological tools, there is a catch.
There's always a catch.
If we all adopt this, right, if we become these incredible, highly engaged listeners, if we deploy the Hotelman gesture and the intellectual sexiness lean everywhere we go, people are going to flock to us.
Absolutely. You'll become a magnet.
And they are going to unload all of their problems, all of their trauma, all of their daily frustrations on us because we are the only people in their lives who make them feel safe.
Now it's exhausting.
And the source material comes with a massive, flashing warning label about exactly this scenario. It warns about the profound destructive dangers of over-empathizing.
Which, on the surface, sounds deeply counterintuitive.
It does.
If listening is good and empathy is the goal of listening, shouldn't ultimate boundless empathy be the ultimate goal?
That is the trap. The author says absolutely no. Boundless empathy is a complete disaster. He introduces a concept he calls the separate line, which is all about establishing the crucial, rigid boundaries of empathy. He explains that true magic listening is absolutely centered on empathy, but to actually survive doing it, you must strictly define what he calls your responsibility zone.
Okay, the responsibility zone. Yeah. The text breaks the world down into two distinct areas, right? My zone and your zone.
My zone and your zone, exactly. And the border between those two zones is the separate line.
Let's break that down with an example.
To illustrate how this works practically, the text gives a very relatable example. Imagine a close friend comes to you and starts bitterly complaining about their horrible boss.
We've all been there.
Now, your job in my zone is to listen. You deploy the good posture, you nod, you validate their feelings, you say, that sounds incredibly frustrating, I can completely see why you are so upset. That is empathy. You are doing your job.
You are holding the emotional space for their experience without judging it.
But here is where it goes catastrophically wrong. If you listen to this story and you get angrier than your friend,
Oh, I've done that.
we all have. If you start aggressively bad-mouthing this boss you have never even met, or worse, if you say, give me their number, I'm going to call your boss right now and give him a piece of my mind, you shouldn't have to put up with this.
Yeah, you're taking over.
If you do that, you have violently crossed the separate line. Because how your friend deals with their boss, whether they quit, whether they confront them, or whether they do absolutely nothing, that is entirely your zone. It is the friend's responsibility, not yours.
It is the fundamental difference between supporting someone through a crisis and adopting their crisis as your own personal mission.
The analogy I keep coming back to is being a lifeguard.
Oh, that's a good one.
If you are a lifeguard and you see someone struggling in the water, your job is to throw them a life preserver. You can guide them to shore, you can offer clear, calm instructions from the edge, but if you jump into the water, panic with them, wrap your arms around them, and start drowning with them, you aren't helping anyone.
No, you're making it worse.
You have just created two victims instead of one. As a listener, you have to be a mirror, reflecting their emotions back to them so they can process them clearly. You cannot be an emotional sponge that just absorbs all their toxic water until you are too heavy to function.
The lifeguard analogy illustrates the mechanism perfectly, and I want to highlight how the author precisely defines the exact role of the listener to prevent this kind of enmeshment.
It's a rule.
Your job is to listen fully, offer advice only if it is possible and explicitly requested, and then, this is the most crucial and difficult part, stop.
Just stop. Just completely stop.
What the person does next, the actions they take based on that conversation, is entirely their problem. It remains firmly in your zone.
Yeah.
Maintaining this rigid boundary is actually the secret characteristic of people who are genuinely great at maintaining long-term human relationships.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because if you don't enforce the separate line, two very destructive things happen. First, you, the listener, will burn out completely. You will become exhausted by carrying the weight of everyone else's unresolvable problems.
You'll start screening your calls and avoiding your friends because you simply don't have the energetic reserves to fix their lives that day.
Exactly. And second, you inadvertently become an overbearing meddler. We have to look at the ego involved in over-empathizing.
There's ego and empathy.
Oh, definitely. Why do we want to fix people? Often it is because sitting with their unresolved pain makes us uncomfortable.
Wow, that's true.
By trying to solve their problem for them, you are actually robbing them of their own agency. You are implicitly communicating to them, you aren't capable of handling this boss, so I must step in and do it for you.
It shifts from genuine empathy into a strange, subtle form of control.
Exactly. True Anshinkan, true peace of mind, comes from knowing someone deeply understands your pain, not from someone treating you like a helpless child who needs rescuing.
That distinction is incredibly profound to me. Empathy without boundaries isn't actually listening, it's enmeshment. It is making their problem about you and your need to feel like a savior.
And understanding that boundary perfectly synthesizes the entire journey we've been on today.
Let's bring all these threads together then. We started today's deep dive with a 100-year-old fable about a universally desired woman who rejected all the charming, entertaining, high-output suitors because she fundamentally just wanted to be heard.
Right.
And then we explored how an izakaya owner learned that active listening, when paired with the mechanical discipline of the right posture, the right hand gestures, and an open, receptive mind, is the ultimate life hack.
It is a behavioral mechanism capable of disarming the most angry, arms-crossed bosses and winning over the most elite, heavily guarded, expert mentors.
It is the literal key to giving the people we work with and the people we love that profound sense of anshinkan or peace of mind. But, as we just discussed, we also learned the vital protective importance of the separate line.
We learned that we don't have to fix people's problems to be great listeners.
In fact, trying to fix them often destroys the magic of the listening itself.
We simply have to bear witness to their experience.
And that is the ultimate conclusion of the source text. I want to remind everyone listening of the author's final takeaway. When someone comes to you, you do not need brilliant advice.
You don't need a five-step solution.
You do not need to be charming or entertaining. The highest goal of human interaction is simply bringing the other person to a place where they can look at you and say, "Thank you for understanding me."
That is the peak of the mountain right there.
Truly.
And to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought, something not explicitly spelled out in the text, but deeply rooted in the psychology of everything we've discussed today. I want you to think about a specific person.
Okay.
Think about the person in your life who frustrates you the most right now. It could be a micromanaging coworker, a stubborn family member, maybe even a partner you are currently bickering with.
I think we all have at least one face popping into our heads right now.
Keep that face in your mind. What if their difficult behavior, their anger, their stubbornness is merely a symptom of them feeling entirely unheard?
Man, that's a reframe.
What if they're suffering from their own version of ping pong disease, desperately trying to find a way to make you understand their perspective? The next time you see them, before you prepare your counter-argument, before you tune your broadcast to shout them down, try an experiment.
What's the experiment?
Try giving them just 3 minutes of the third row izakaya staff treatment. Uncross your arms, nod, smile slightly, deploy the open palms, and just listen without trying to fix them. You might just find out they don't actually want to fight you, they just want to know you are truly in the room with them.
The ROI on those 3 minutes could change that relationship entirely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the profound, surprisingly mechanical, and deeply human art of listening. We will catch you next time.